There's a specific moment that almost every executive can point to. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it comes in the middle of a meeting. Sometimes it's a decision that didn't land the way you expected. Sometimes it's the slow accumulation of moments where you realize your read on a situation was wrong and you didn't know why. I call it the moment instincts stop being enough. Not the moment you fail, not the moment you get fired, not the moment you start to notice a gap between how confident you feel going into a decision and how clean the outcome is when it plays out. The gap is one of the most important signals a leader can receive. Most people ignore it or rationalize it, or they attribute it to external factors, the market, the team, bad timing. Leaders who perform at the highest level learn to listen to it, and then they do something about it. Welcome back to Talk with Chip. I'm Chip Carlson. This is episode 3, and today we're going inside that moment. What it is, what it's telling you, and what to do when you start to feel it. Before we talk about the limits of instincts, I want to give them their due because instincts are not a liability. In most situations, they're a genuine asset, and they're one of the things that separates experienced leaders from inexperienced ones. Look, instincts are a compression of experiences. Every time you've navigated a difficult situation, made some sort of tough call under pressure, had to read the room, handled a crisis experience, those all get stored. Over time, it becomes a pattern recognition. You walk into a situation and something immediately tells you what's happening or what to do. That's your instinct. That pattern recognition is powerful. It's often right. It's usually a fast decision, familiar territory. You're managing a team, you're running an operation, you're solving an execution problem. Seasoned instincts outperform analysis almost every time. The problem isn't that instincts are unreliable. The problem is that instincts are only as good as the patterns they're built on. And so when the environment changes, when the stakes get bigger, when the variables are more complex, the decisions are more consequential. The pattern from your previous experience may not necessarily match the current situation that you're standing in. You've got to think about, for example, a doctor who's been practicing for 20 years. Their instincts in familiar diagnostic situations are extraordinary. But in a case that's an outlier, that sits outside the normal pattern, it's a rare presentation or an unusual combination of symptoms, those same instincts can lead them to the wrong diagnosis. Not because they're a bad doctor, but because the pattern doesn't fit the historical situations. That's exactly what happens to executives. The patterns they built in operations, in management, in specific industry context, those patterns work until they don't. And often you don't know they've stopped working until you're already right in the middle of a decision that isn't going the way you expected. I want to tell you about a specific type of situation where I've seen this play out and where I've lived it myself. You're in an executive team meeting. A significant decision is on the table. Maybe it's a major capital allocation. Maybe it's a market expansion. Maybe it's a leadership change, putting someone in or taking someone out. You've looked at the data, you've heard the arguments, and your gut says, I know what to do here. So you make a call or you advocate strongly for a position, and you do it with the confidence of someone who has made 1,000 decisions and been right most of the time. And then 6 months later or 12 months later, the outcome tells a different story. Now, here's the critical question. What do you do with that? Most executives do one of two things. They externalize, the market shifted, the team didn't execute, circumstances changed, or they minimize. One bad outcome doesn't invalidate a track record, right? And both responses are understandable, but both are also very dangerous because the question isn't whether external factors played a role. They almost always do. The question is, what was the quality of the decision at the moment it was made? Did you have the right information? Did you pressure test your assumptions? Did you consider the perspectives you might be missing? Did you slow down long enough to think about what you didn't know? The most expensive executive mistakes I've witnessed and made weren't failures of intelligence. They were failures of process, smart people making fast decisions with high confidence and incomplete frameworks. That's what the moment is. It's not failure. It's feedback. It's your operating system telling you it needs an upgrade. There are specific categories where executive instincts built primarily from operational experience consistently fall short. I want to name 3 of them because naming them is the first step to compensating for them. Operational decisions have relatively contained consequences. If you change the process, you see the result within weeks. The problem is with executive decisions, especially around strategy, people, and capital, those have consequences that ripple in ways that take months or possibly years to fully reveal themselves. Instincts are calibrated for immediate feedback loops. They're much less reliable when the feedback is delayed over 12 to 24 months. This is why so many otherwise smart executives make bold moves that look right in the moment and wrong in retrospect. They weren't thinking far out enough. Not because they're not capable of it, because their instincts weren't built for that time horizon. Organizational dynamics. When you're a manager, you can read the room because the room is your team. You know these people. You understand what motivates them, what threatens them, how they'll react in most situations. At the executive level, the room is the entire organization. And increasingly, it includes the board, investors, key customers, and external stakeholders. Reading organizational dynamics at that scale requires a different level of intelligence. It requires understanding systems, not just people. And most leaders haven't built that muscle yet. The executive who is excellent at reading 10 people in a room often struggle to read 100 people across 3 business units. The skill doesn't automatically scale. That's the issue. Their own blind spots. This one's the hardest. Every pattern we've built contains the biases that were present when we built it. The industries we came from, the companies that shaped us, the mentors we had and didn't have, the experiences we had and didn't have. When we trust our instincts completely, we're also trusting all the unexamined assumptions built into them. And those assumptions are often invisible to us, precisely because they're so deeply embedded. The leaders who perform at the highest level have found ways to surface their blind spots through feedback, through diverse perspectives, through structured reflection processes, through, and I'll say this plainly, things like therapy and coaching that most business cultures still treat as optional rather than essential. Building the upgrade. So what do you actually do when you recognize that your instincts need an upgrade? I want to give you 3 things. Not a framework yet. We'll get into frameworks in depth starting in episode 8. These are orientations, ways of positioning yourself relative to your own decision making. First, slow down on the decision that matters most. The instinct to decide quickly is strong, especially for people who built their career on being decisive. But not all decisions deserve the same speed. The ones with the longest consequences deserve the most deliberate process. Learn to distinguish between decisions that need to be fast and the decisions that need to be right. Second, get comfortable not knowing. High-performing operators are used to being the person with the answer. At the executive level, the most important skill is often asking the right question, including the uncomfortable ones. What am I assuming here that might be wrong? Who in this room sees differently than I do, and why? What would have to be true for the opposite conclusion to be correct? Third, build your feedback loops. The most dangerous thing about executive decisions is the time delay on feedback. You need to actively create shorter loops. Through trusted advisors, through structured check-ins, through the discipline of reviewing your own decisions 6 and 12 months out. Not to punish yourself for being wrong, but to calibrate your instincts against actual outcomes over time. These 3 things together are the beginning of what I call the personal leadership system, one of the 5 levers in the executive decision flywheel. We'll go deep on all of it in the episodes ahead. The moment your instincts stop being enough is not a crisis, it's an invitation to build a more sophisticated operating system, to develop frameworks that extend your instincts rather than replace them, to become the kind of leader who doesn't just trust their gut, but knows when to trust it, when to question it, and when to override it. That's the work. And it's the most important work you'll ever do as an executive. Next week, we'll shift to the LPC thread, leadership performance capacity. We're going to talk about the operating conditions that make all of this possible, because none of the frameworks in the world will work if the system running them is depleted. If this has been useful, subscribe and share it with someone who is at this moment in their career. I'm Chip Carlson. This is Talk with Chip. See you next week.